First thing I want to do is remove the wheel. If you have these hubcaps, just go ahead and use a 19mm socket, remove all these little plastic nuts that hold the hubcap on, and then you can go ahead and remove the wheel. Set this aside, and continuing with the 19mm socket, remove the wheel. With a 14mm, I'm going to break free the two caliper to bracket bolts. This bottom one, you can probably get a power tool or a socket and ratchet in here, but this top one is kind of tight just because of the parking brake cable, but I'm just going to use a ratchet wrench and get those two completely out of here. Next, you can use a little pry bar, just pry the caliper off of here. Okay, set it aside, get the pads off of here. There we go, set those aside. And now we can undo the two 13mm bolts that connect the caliper bracket to the knuckle. One's at the top right here. And remove both of them. You have to push the bracket in to get this one out just because of this bolt up here. Remove the bracket, set it aside. Now you can take the rotor off. All right, 15mm socket. Let's remove all 4 of these bolts. They might be a little hard to access, but with a couple extensions and maybe a swivel, you can hopefully get to all of them. Let's unplug the ABS sensor. That way the wire doesn't get ripped off. Use a large hammer and just hit it back and forth until it breaks free. It's already breaking free, perfect. There we go. Hold it straight out. The backing plate will come with it. That's normal. Of course, you're going to want to reuse this, so save it and clean it up. If it's in really poor condition, you're going to want to replace it. And looks like this part stayed in here, so I'll have to punch that out. There's the rest of it. Now let's clean up this area. You want a nice flat mounting surface. This one looks pretty good, except I will clean inside here in the hole where the wheel bearing goes through, just because I want it to seat all the way nice and flush with no debris in here. So let's get a little sanding disc. You can use sandpaper if yours isn't too bad, a wire brush, whatever you have. Just clean this up. Now I'm going to apply some anti-seize to the surface here. That's going to cover up the aluminum, make sure that it doesn't corrode again in the future. Go on this inner ring and then go on the outside as well. Nice thin layer will do the trick. Now take the backing plate, line it up, and then take the hub, line that up, slide the hub through. Make sure it presses in all the way, which it does. That's perfect. Now let's go to the back side and put in the bolts. I'm going to go ahead and start all these by hand. I'm going to tighten these up, and the torque is 47 foot-pounds. There's no way I can get in here with a torque wrench and accurately tighten it just because of the swivel that is needed. So 47 foot-pounds, if you can find a way, go for it. I'm just going to make them tight with my air gun. I will go in a cross pattern though. That way the wheel bearing can seat itself properly up against the hub. And don't forget to plug in the ABS wire. Make sure it clicks. Let's apply some anti-seize to the outside of the hub here. This will prevent the rotor from getting stuck. It'll also prevent corrosion and rust from building up and swelling the surface up. If it's not sitting flush, you get braking pulsations and other issues. So Make sure that this is covered in some rust protective coating. You don't need a lot because you don't want it to start flinging out of here once the wheel starts spinning fast at highway speeds. So just a thin layer will go a long way. Make sure you get some around this ring here. That's where the rotor will most likely seize if it does. Install your rotor. Grab the bracket, line it up, and slide the 2 bolts in. Start them on by hand. The torque for these 2 is 96 foot-pounds. That's 1. And that's 2. Let's get the pads in. The inner one gets a wear indicator that sits on the top. Slide it into the bracket. It's supposed to slide nice and smooth. Put the outer pad in. That one does not get a wear indicator, by the way. Now take your caliper, line it up with the pads and the caliper bracket. Line up the bolt holes and start in your 2 mounting bolts. Start them in by hand so that they don't cross thread. Let's bottom them out and then we'll torque them. If you have to hold the slider because it's spinning, go ahead and do so. If you're using pliers, just be careful of the boot. The torque for these is 26 foot-pounds. All right, let's get the wheel back on, put on all 5 of your lug nuts, bottom them out, and torque them to 100 foot-pounds. And if you have the hubcap, reinstall that, line up the hole with the valve stem, and tighten up these plastic nuts by hand, that way they don't strip out. Down the road you go.